Hey, DeRacers. So today we're going to be nerding out a bit. So make sure you got your pen and paper and your TI-83s. And so what we're going to be doing is more a little bit on my research. A backstory of how we function is we both independently research quite a lot. That's what we do mostly on our free time. And then as we do this research, we come up with hypotheses, we test them, we discuss them. A lot of them get tossed out. But as we start to get closer and closer on stuff that we believe is factual, this is where we start to build tools. It morphs into tools. And today I want to talk about some of the stuff that I have found. This is going to be a segue as well. This is going to be talking about how we're analyzing data and looking for anomalies. Specifically, it's with linear regression, statistical term. And then as we get further into this, we want to have an AMA or a discussion where we're going to be bringing on OXG, who also does very similar studies to this. And the idea is to bring in people that are deep diving into statistics and to be able to pick each other's brains openly so you could see what is it like of the collaboration that takes place behind the scenes.
That's exactly right. Looking forward to that AMA.
Oh, yeah.
I think I'll probably end up hosting, be the one asking all the questions because I enjoy doing statistical analysis as well, but I tend to sit back and defer to you when it gets really deep in the weeds.
And so for everybody that's watching, please, if you have questions, if you have topics, ultimately we're going to be trying to focusing on horse traits, like analyzing speed on different surfaces, stamina, reaction, breeding, those kinds of topics. This is where we want to focus.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so now on today, what we're going to be talking about, or what I'm going to be mostly doing, is presenting this on linear regression. Now, I'm going to try to make sure that even if you're not a scholar in statistics, this will make sense. But ultimately, linear regression is having a line, a repeatable line that you could draw from two different ends or from wherever your slope is, and you should be able to follow suit. And this gives you the ability to predict whether or not your stats are drifting above or below an expected line. Now, this all started when OXG brought to our attention the three different phases. And as we dug into this, we found this to be, honestly, it's fact. And then we compared this with Christie's, and he was able to confirm with us. That first phase on every single track is 15 rolls, so 1.5 furlongs. And that is what I'm referring to here as your acceleration phase. The middle of the race is after your 15 rolls up until the 70% of the race, because the final phase is 30%. So if you're running a 10 furlong race, the final phase is the last 3 furlongs. First phase always is going to be 1.5 furlongs, and then everything else falls in the middle. Now, what's fascinating by this, these are two different horses. It's very difficult for us to get good data on horses because a lot of people will find tracks where they realize that they're stronger on and they just stay there. And so few horses have gone through a brutal study stage of being able to get enough data points on it. So in this example, whoever owns horse ID number 800, props to you. Thank you. I use your horse a lot. And so on the top row here is horse 800. The bottom row is Skondert 1418. And what's fascinating is here in this Turf 15 example, you're going to see very similar trails. Both horses have this nice line as you're accelerating. You get to the middle stage and it continues to be relatively flat. And then as you get towards the final 30, you see it have, again, a bit more acceleration and with a little bit of a pull up. I'm hoping that that is evidence to give us the ability to start studying stamina. Now that's 15 turf, switching to 11 synth. You'll see the exact same model. The acceleration drops down, it gets to a flat line middle, and then as it gets to the final kicks, we switch to dirt 7s, same exact thing. Acceleration, flat line, final kicks. So as I had this ability to review these, I then started to question, well, what about all horses? We don't have enough data on all horses, so how can I try to infer whether or not this is repeatable, or do we just have two statistical anomalies with these two horses? So what I did is I then took the average population. I took every single race on 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, up to 15s, separating them out on dirt, synth, and turf. And then what I did is I divided each of those by the total furlongs to give me the average furlong time in seconds. So here you could see the population average on a 2 furlong race is 12.79 seconds per furlong. As you go all the way to 7s, the average furlong pace is 12.36. Now, showing what we just showed you about how the first phase is that acceleration, that is the slowest phase. So it makes sense that the longer you run, you're pulling your averages down. So you could see down below how I say phase one is the slowest. So you start slow. As you run, you're pulling that average down. And when you get to the final one, it's even faster. So again, it makes sense why the longer you race, everybody accelerates. This was weird for us at first because with stamina, we kept thinking it's going to slow down. But
yeah,
you go ahead.
Yeah, when you think about this, it's like watering something down. It's like watering paint down, right? The more water you add, the weaker it gets. And so in this case, the more we add faster rolls, the lower that number is going to get. So the longer we spend in that final 30% in particular, the lower that number. So that's what we're able to prove here, that it is getting faster as you get to the longer distances.
Correct. Now, the other thing that was kind of interesting is doing this research, we also have a suspicion that DeRace was very intentional by making these furlongs 7, 11, and 15, because I suspect, and I think you would agree, that if there was a 15 furlong dirt, we would not see it continue to accelerate. I believe that stamina does burn out around this marking point. I think it's starting to burn out around here. In turf, it's just still too difficult to identify.
I actually think that there's a little more to this as well, because we know there are going to be tracks that go longer. We know that turf will eventually have something that goes beyond 15. So I think it's the same theory here. But what's really fascinating to me is I think they, like you said, did this intentionally, because the Gen 0 and Gen 1 horses probably don't have the ability to have stamina that goes much beyond where these cutoffs are. Potentially a little bit, but it really wouldn't make sense to have, like you said, say a dirt 15 if none of the horses can run a fast dirt 15. We would just have a bunch of records that were going to get broken. So that just wouldn't be as fun. So this seems to be very intentional cutting them here.
All right. So the basic takeaway from this one, and it might seem pretty obvious, but dirt is slower than synth and slower than turf. And this seems to be constant. And it doesn't necessarily mean like if your horse is faster on turf than it is on synth, it doesn't mean that turf is your preferred surface. It just means that it's easier to run on those. So you should run faster. So as you look across the board, these are 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s. So we only have 5s, 6s, and 7s, which are on all three of them. And as you look down the line, it does get faster as you move down towards turf, and it goes faster as you move further towards the duration. Now, this, again, another shout out to OXG on this one. He did a different study. Now, this is normal distribution. And if you understand statistics, excuse me on that, normal distribution basically is just showing you of all the races, of all the horses that have ran a Greenfield 2, this is just showing you all of the times. And what's nice about this is that it's very rare, as you can see, to run that world record, as well as it's equally as rare to run a slow world record, where almost all horses fall. The most commonly placed is exactly in the middle. And this is how you take your average, you take your standard deviation, and this is how you do statistical probability to figure out, like, what's the chances of my horse. But what I like about this model and the relevance that this has to this study is by making these assumptions that everything is going to get faster as you move down on that line and faster as you move further along. Seeing normal distribution gives us evidence that the data sets are going to be reliable. When you have a good bell curve that looks like this, it just shows us that RNG is doing what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to stay within its scope of random, and it's hitting everything the way it should. So OXG did this for all of their tracks. This is just one. So it just is another piece of evidence for me to continue on in my research. So now this is a tool that I started to build. It's not done. And if I can fix it and perfect it, I'll make this thing public. But this is me now studying each of the phased rolls of Skondert. So this is 1418. And what this means is this is phase one. So the first 15 rolls of dirts, synth, and on turfs. Now, again, even though I'm taking all these like on the 15 furlong, I'm only assessing the first furlong and a half, or the first 15 rolls on each of these. Now, over here, I'm taking what is the average of the first 15 on 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, and 7s on dirts. And my average roll of my first phase is a 1291, then 1281, 1279. So it makes sense that on the first phase, I'm getting faster as I move to synth, as I get faster as I move to turf. Then I go to the middle phase. And again, this is now where I spend the bulk of my race. And it's, from what I'm seeing, to be quite linear. Same trend, 1248, 1239, 1231. Now, there's going to be some degree of fluctuation from here. In my opinion, that's just RNG. This is just focusing in on the fact that when you're in these phases, these horses are maintaining this kind of expectation. And when I get to the final stage, the kick, when I'm trying to fight towards the end, again, you'll see the same thing, 187, 176, 166 or 1166. So it is following the trend that we understood with the white paper, where because it's easier on these tracks, you can get more speed out of them.
Now, something that I noticed, and I'm just going to quickly point it out here because it delves into some studying that I'm doing, and I'm looking in particular on the side. I'm not ready to propose it yet, but I'm looking at stamina, really deep diving into trying to figure out where stamina burns out for particular horses. So when I look at these separate numbers, I'm really intrigued. On the far right-hand side, you have the average results that follow what Not a Vampire is saying here, where it does start slower on dirt and get progressively faster on the different surfaces. But when I look at different things here, I will point out that, for instance, in the first phase, when you are accelerating as a horse out the gate in those first 15 rolls, when this is Skondert, 1418, horse 1418, on his 5s and 6s, he averages a 1301 roll. And that doesn't line up with the 2s, 3s, 4s, and even the 7s. And so what Not a Vampire and I tend to go back and forth on a bit here is, if you could, in theory, or in practice, as we do more and more of these, do thousands and thousands of each of these races, will they come into alignment, or will we actually see a drifting up, and will that potentially be an indicator of stamina loss, in particular here on dirt, for, in this case, Skondert? So when I see those anomalies, I get intrigued because it perks me up to pay attention to stamina. But again, when we're talking about this linear regression topic, we're looking at the average as a whole. We want to see those, in this case, regressing or negatively progressing as you move down the line to the right. So we are seeing that here, but I do like to poke at Not a Vampire and point out where things don't seem to fit the exact line.
And again, guys, this is science and statistics. We always have our own internal debates. We still have one here. Like, I don't fully agree with that. But for me, I believe that it's going to become obvious that one of two theories are going to be the victor. So one of those theories is that, yeah, stamina is going to have a burn off, or there's going to be different usages of stamina that's going to lead to consequences. The only way that you're going to be able to prove that, though, is to have extensive amount of data, so that way that you can compare those across the board. And I'll be going into that a little bit more. The other thing I think that this is going to show is it's either going to show stamina burns off, or it's going to show that you need to run more to pull it down. And cycles, or those good and bad runs, is a lot more than 10, 20, 30 races. The reason why I got set off on this, and I think my next slide might show it, is that if you've seen Skondert on the tracks, you will know that he hammers turf, mid-range turfs a lot. 8s and 9s is his bread and butter. He wins. That's my favorite place to race him. But as I was doing this research, I was looking at my 13s, and I only had like 30, I think, races on 13s, 14s, and 15s, and I gave up on them. I assumed that Skondert did not have much data or didn't have the stamina for it. But while I was doing this research, I found an anomaly where I was scratching my head. So I started hitting those tracks. He is now, let's see if I have it here. This is Skondert. So you'll notice that my two best tracks turned out to be 14s and 15s. And I've ran it now 77 times, 142 times, and 92 times. Previously, like I said, I gave up on these. And what I had realized is, when I was looking to these anomalies, that his data set at 2197, 2009, 2039, these were much higher. These were around like 2025s, 2027s. And I just assumed he was slow. But following this linear regression model and knowing that I put up a lot of numbers before, it just made me wonder, okay, so if I hit these, does it start to pull it down? And it did. 70 races in there. He's dropped to a 12, 18, 7, or 6.5. Now here with 142, it's starting to lift again. So this is where I start to wonder, is this an anomaly with 142 races? Don't think so. Or is this evidence that he's starting to burn out his stamina? So
now
the way that
you're pointing out the 14s and 15s. I'm not sure if your mouse cursor
I'm
can
sorry,
go over those
yes.
77 and 142. I just wanted to call that out because we are talking about the tail end of turf, and
Correct.
that's something that we're really starting to pay attention more to. For me, especially as I consider stamina burn, turf. We all know turf uses the least amount of stamina, or at least the algorithm is one in which you have more as you finish out your race. So looking at Skondert and seeing that data start to really speed up as he gets to the end on those 14s and 15s, when we think about the linear progression of his average furlong pace, we should expect to see the rest of it leading up to that fall in line. And that's where this blip or this bump in the data caught your eye.
Correct. And now the second part that's catching my eye that I'm trying to test out is if you look up here with my synthetics, 10s and 11s, I have 112 data sets on synthetic 10s, which to me I feel like is a pretty trustworthy number, averaging a 12.25 furlong. When I move over here to 11s, I climb to 12.31. So 44 hits. So I've raced this thing 44 times, which historically I would have said is plenty of data sets. But my question that I need to solve now is that evidence that Skondert's stamina is burned out? And like, will he pull that 12.31 down to be sub 12.25? If he does, I might discover that he's going to have just an incredible run because he might have had a really bad stretch. My synth 11s at 2.27 win rate, it's his lowest anywhere. So I'm intentionally hitting those hard. And then for the sake of data studies, I'm going through and I've finished hitting all of my dirts that I gave up on originally. I'm now attacking my synthetics early stages. So you're going to see Skondert out there for a while. But ultimately, when you're using these tools that we've created, the thing that I want you to highlight, if you want to do your own assessment on this, is paying attention to your average furlong. Looking at his dirts, I go 12.76, 6.4, 5.5, 4.8, 4.136. Exactly as I would expect. Moving on to my synth, 12.74, 5.4, 4.2, 4.132, 2.8, 2.9, 100. That's not that big of a deal to me. The 12.30, 12.25, 3.1. I might want to touch this synthetic 9 a little bit more, but the next thing that I would do is I would compare what is the realistic number. So maybe you take the average outside here and you say maybe he would get down to a 12.28 if I can really pull that down. And then you can compare it to the population average and then decide, is 12.28 worth it? And if it's not, probably have done sufficient testing.
Yeah, you just touched on something really important there, and that is Skondert's a good horse, and it allows you to run hundreds and hundreds of races across every surface. You can maintain profitability. So when we're, like you just said, when you're considering looking at a particular track, in this case, you were looking at synthetic 9s, that's a really good question. What is the population average? And if you were to pull yours down into alignment with your linear regression line, or your slope there as you go from your 2s through to your 11s, is it worth even pursuing? For some horses, absolutely yes. There's going to be these blips where it's like, oh my word, you're going to make some money here if you run this more. But for other horses, it's like you start really bad and you pull it into bad. That's not worth it. So I just want to make sure that that's clear here. We're not claiming that everyone needs to be running 100 races on every track. But if you see that fringe track when you're doing your analysis, you're really close to that population average already, and it's a blip, especially when you look left and right on other tracks, that's where you're going to want to target. Correct. If you have a horse that you're already finding profitability, this is where I would encourage you just to stretch your horizon, because I did that with Skondert and now I'm making more. The other version of this is if your horizontals are not giving you enough insight, the next thing you could do is you could do some degree of verticals. And if I focus on my 5, 6, 7s, because again, those exist everywhere. If we take here on our dirt 5s, 12.48, move to synth, 12.41, move to turf, 12.3192. Then again, 12.41, 12.32, 12.29. Go into 7s, 12.36, 12.28, 12.26. They all follow the same pattern. Now, every horse that I've studied that has extensive data, which is very few,
please everybody race more, hit those tracks. It gives us better understanding of these things. And so it's not 100% concrete because, again, there's not enough horses out there that have enough of this data. This might show us that there's opportunities for us to better improve our training techniques, or this is going to lead to us being able to better assess the stamina.
And one of those things, that was a perfect segue. One of the things for me that I've been looking at, and it relates to stamina scoring, is looking at the front end and the tail end of that line that you're creating, right? This upper and lower number. If you run your synth 2s and your synth 11s, and you can plot out that course and you feel confident about that course, you can determine whether or not you should even run 3s through 10s. It's entirely possible that just looking at your tails, your front and back end, allows you to determine whether or not you'll even continue training a horse, just doing discovery. And that's helpful for some people who don't want to find out whether or not there's one track in the middle of synth that they're actually halfway decent at, but they just want to breed a horse, hit it hard, and toss it to the side if need be, or continue to run if it looks like it has potential.
100% agreed. And especially as we come up with wearables, jockeys, and the burning capabilities, my hope is to make sure we give the community enough understanding, because that would be awful if you had a champion that you just did not run it correctly and you end up burning it because you thought it was a donkey. We're trying to figure out ways to give you the ability to quickly assess and find out, like, was this horse an anomaly? Was it bad and it got really good results somehow, or was it getting really good results somehow and it realistically is bad? And so with that,
we got let's dive in.
Handful of horses that we've got.
Horses that you guys were fantastic passing along to us.
Yes,
giving us some IDs. I'm going to give all the credit to Not a Vampire for pulling all of these and comparing them. But yeah, this was really fun for us to dive into, and we'll try to hit on these pretty quickly and give you an idea of maybe where you could target something, or just applaud you for doing your job already.
So starting with 2372, obviously you like dirt. Over 2,500 results on this post the algorithm change. And if you look at this, the linear regression model follows perfectly. 12, 7, 1, 50, 44, 36, 32, 31. Everything about that follows suit to what I was expecting in this. And you did a phenomenal job. You have well distributed tests. You got enough data sets on all of those. Everything about your dirts, I look at that and go, that doesn't surprise me one bit. So then when we shift that model down, we now take a look at synthetic. 12, 7, 1, 55, 39, 41. So it lifted up right there. 36 dropped back down. 37, not too big a difference. Then we've got a nice drop off, 600s. And then again, 600s. And then 25 and 29. It's those weird blips. When I see those things, I scratch my head and going, okay, I don't know if you've tested those enough. Now, it doesn't mean that your horse isn't synth horse. It's just showing you that there's might be an opportunity if you're trying to just throw out some random races and you see those are appearing. You might want to try hitting them a couple of times, especially when I see you only have 11 here. When you have 25 to the left or to the right of that, you might be able to pull this thing down back to maybe like a 12 to 8, possibly. And then this last one, the only one that I would really encourage you to try is when you see your final one is a lift. That might be an insight to where your stamina resides. And the fact that your horse is so good on dirt, that would make me normally think it has a high stamina. So if it's really burning out on synth 11, that seems questionable. So I would hit that one a little bit and see if that thing lifts up or stays lifted up. Then you're going to be able to potentially understand your stamina a bit more. Or if it falls down, you might find out that you got a banger on synth 11. So that's something I would test.
Now this is 2372, and people who've been around DeRace for the last 8 months know that this is Florwise Balios, and this is one of those horses that very early in the game was running forever. I think it's got over 5,000 total races now, over 3,000 since the algorithm change. That's incredible data. The 5,000, this was one of those horses that right out the gate was incredible on dirt. It's still incredible on dirt. In fact, my early data shows, and you can see that it's playing out here, that it has incredible stamina. So when we think about synthetic, especially what you just said with regard to synthetic 11s, I would suspect that there's still plenty in the tank. It's got a good speed score. It's got a good reaction score. And knowing that it has really good stamina on dirt, I suspect this horse can pretty much run everywhere. It just doesn't have enough data on the longer distances, in particular on turf and the tail end of synthetic.
Yep. Yeah, I would definitely recommend test some of those long range. I think you'll be surprised, pleasantly surprised. Great horse. All right, so now taking a look at 3805, some of these horses, I mean, not all the horses that we're going to be assessing are champions. Not all of them are going to be strong or good everywhere. So looking at this, we're not going to necessarily be able to show you like, hey, this is a brilliant place to run. It's more of just giving you a sense to determine, have you adequately tested? So taking a look right out the gate with your dirts, the only thing about the dirts, but you're in a sea of red, I question your final one on your 7 because that pulls up pretty high. But you've probably figured it out. I'm guessing your horse doesn't like dirt all too well. Your reaction's okay. You put a lot of time in synth and turf. Doesn't surprise me there one bit. Going across the board, perfect regression. So this looks great from 1276 to 5641, 41, 31. Every single step of the way, it keeps dropping. Now, the thing that I'm really intrigued by, realistically, is your final range on your turf. You're pulling down here. You got 219 on turf 15, which is great data, and you're holding a 12.2044. That's fast. As we back this one up, this right here, your 13, this is the one I think you should hit the most because you go left and you got it 21.75, which is faster than the population average, and you go right of that 2010. So the fact that you're pulling a 22.85 on 13s, that's an anomaly in my opinion. And I think if you hit that 10, 20 more times, I would suspect that this would be falling closer to like a 12.205. That'd be my guess, and I think you're going to see a lot better results on that number.
Yeah, and I think right now this horse, the only thing I'll add is that I suspect it has pretty decent stamina, but because it's lacking some of those mid-range, or I should say latter half turf races, in this case, the 11s and 12, or no, 12s and 13s. Because of that, it actually pulls up on some of its numbers and makes it look like it runs out of stamina. And that's why you see that 12.22. But the fact that the 14s and 15s pull back down says, you know what, I still think it has more in the tank. So we may see that as you run more 14s, the number may creep up a little bit closer to 12.21, but those 13s should come back down to 12.21. So you'll probably see those kind of fluctuate somewhere around there so that you finish out with a more even spread going from 12.23 midway through to 12.20 on the end.
And if this horse is making you money, I would recommend, similar to the previous horse, hit some more of your synth 11s. You got this lift up, a very subtle lift up on your 15s, which again could indicate this is where your stamina is starting to burn off. So as we get more surfaces or longer tracks to hit, this might be good data for you to start pulling so you could be better prepared to adapt to those tracks if and when those become prevalent.
Yep.
All right, 1615. Taking a look at this one here. Let's start with your dirt. The 7, 9, 57, 54, 42, 39, and then a lift up on 7. So again, it could be that you don't have the data for it, or same thing with your stamina. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to want to hit that. If you were to take a look at this, if I were just to guess, I would think that if this number was to pull down, you'd be around a 12.35, 12.36 maybe on a good one. Compare that to your population average, and if it seems like that will get you some wins if you hit those numbers, maybe you want to test it. If it's not good enough to win, I would just skip it and just assume that your training's done there, unless you're trying to push your stamina.
Now, one thing I'm going to point out about this horse, 1615, is that it appears as if you like to run all the short distances, and I'm not 100% sure why. That seemed to become your favorite. You have this horse has a good speed score, especially on turf, not so great on dirt. But the turf speed score tells me, hey, this thing can really get going. And right now its stamina is about 2/3 of the way through the track. So I would suspect that, I mean, right now there's a lot of turf 5 data here, but beyond that, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I suspect you're going to see this thing speed up, and all the way to 11, even where you get to a 12.22 there. or shoot, even the 13s at 12.21. That's a good number. But yeah, you're showing it right there on that 12s. That number is going to drop.
Absolutely, it's going to drop. That's a bad number, and I would argue the same with your 14. The fact that you're almost 300s slower on your 14s than you are with your 13s, that's surprising to me. And your indisputables at 1909, and you have really bad Furlong data around this one, that will probably drop, which means that I bet your indisputable is going to shoot up to like 23, 24%, considering you only have 22 hits. So I would test this one. Same thing with your 12s. That's a huge lift up, going from 223 to 276 and then down to 21. This is bad data. And the fact that you have 60 to your left and 97 on your right, those are hit a lot more. So I would trust those numbers. So I bet you just had a really bad stretch on this one. You can tell with your 11-3 indisputable, I wouldn't trust those numbers. Hit more tracks.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a speed score and a reaction score combo that is what you see, especially for turf here, what you see in the top 20 horses on turf. So that may not hold, but the odds are it will. And I suspect you've actually got an incredible turf horse here that just hasn't run enough. I mean, it runs some, but looking across there, it looks like the indisputable scores are all red, and that they are. A lot of them are. But the fact that they're all double digits is incredible to me. That there's nowhere on turf that this horse says, nah, I can't run at all. And that to me says you're on the fringe on a lot of stuff, and you may need 50 more races on each of them to really truly figure out whether or not it's a above average population average horse.
And also solid reaction speed. Just props on that one. All right, so now switching over to this guy here, not as good reaction. The 475, that's a little bit scary for me.
Following one of the worst reaction scores that we've seen, and I've got some donkeys that can do that, so don't feel bad. This is seen in the game, but when we look at analyzing this, like, you're already jumping out of the gate behind the rest of the pack, so that's tough.
Yeah, you're already to a disadvantage on that one. Now, you have really good data on your Dirt 5. So of all of your data sets there, I would trust this one. So for this, I would then go vertical. So you go from a 12.42, you drop to a 12.37. That makes sense. It should be faster. But then I drop down here. So one of two things is going to happen, in my opinion. Either this 12.37 is not going to hold, and you're going to see it lift up to make room for this bottom one to be 12.37, or this one's going to drop. So if you think your horse is a turf horse, I would hit your 5s a bit more and see if this thing drops. If you do that and it does not drop, it might show you that this one here is going to be faulty, and that's going to slow down. Now, going across the board, same way as we've done before with everybody: 7-8, 6-0, 5-1, 3-7, 3-8, 3-8, 3-1, 3-5. That lift up's pretty big to then drop back down with 71 hits. So here on your synth 9s, that one's probably unrealistic, but whether or not you want to hit it or not, that's going to be dependent on the population average. So then let's go on to your turfs. That 12.37, like I said, I question it a lot due to your synth 5s. And then you drop off to 3-1, 3-3, again, another lift up, but then a big drop down here to 25. So your turf 5, 6, 7s, you might see that one lower. You only got 22 hits there, so you might want to do some experimentation on that. And then as we continue down, 23, 28, another big liftoff. That should not exist. You go vertical to here on your synth 10, 71 hits with 28. I bet you this one's going to drop closer to 23. And if you go left and right, that would be a line. So that one might have some opportunities for you. But what's most impressive is if you scan all the way to the right on your 14s and 15s on your turfs, a 12.19 and a 12.20 is fast, really fast. You're indisputable, and your scores here don't necessarily align with that, but you don't have much data. So if I were in your position, I would be hitting your 14s. I would see if that goes up. And then the same thing with I've said previously, you might want to test this long range, because that might give you some indications on your stamina if this horse is profitable for you. If you're losing money on this horse, of course, that I wouldn't recommend hammering this kind of data. If your horse is not making you money, find a place where it's safe and then use that money to invest in further research.
Yeah, and this is, I believe Purple owns this horse, 5627. So, you know, we know Purple's out there running a bazillion horses as well. So you got options. We know you know that. But one thing that I'm really intrigued by the data that I'm seeing on this horse is your turf speed score is incredible. It's actually really, really good, but you have a bad reaction. So you're having to try to make up ground, and that is currently showing that you're having to use up too much stamina to get caught back up, and you find yourself just outside of the podium. And that's why we're seeing really good speed scores, but you're already behind, so your podium rates are sitting in the mid-20s, and that's just a bummer. But it it happens, and you may find that those 14s and 15s do climb a little bit, like Not a Vampire was saying. But yeah, sometimes you get that incredible speed score with that horrible reaction score, and you want to slap something. But this is the sort of horse where it, depending on who its parents were, it may have gotten the benefit from that speed, and you may want to breed them again, see if you can get a better reaction score along with the good speed score.
Yep. All right, so now 5689, this is also purple. So he won this horse. This is I'm a Vampire. And so out the gate, I'm impressed with the way that you've been doing your discovery. You do it the way that I would normally do it, and you're scatter shotting everything. And so your early stages, I mean, you barely have, I don't think you have anything over 30. So of course, I know you're pushing this one, which you should be doing. So, but following suit with this, on the early stages, if you wanted to skimp out on your training, you might want to test those outer limits, like we try to figure out if there's a healthy slope. That might give you insight to determine which tracks to hit. And on the early stages, like I love seeing the green lit up on your indisputable. It's a good sign when you're training, but because you're so early, of course, you know this, it might not hold for those, but you might see them appear at other spots. So as we go left to right, 6, 7, 6, 6, 4, 2, 3, 8, up until this point, this looks good. 29 drops down, and then that 41 doesn't make any sense. So the fact that you got killer indisputable scores right now with your 5s and 6s, I would be tempted to run more of those 7s here, because if you could pull this one down to match, and these are already faster than the population average, you might find out that 7s are a strong suit. Otherwise, you might find the opposite, and you might find out that you just had really good luck on these ones. So as you continue to hit this, do not neglect your 7s.
Yep.
All right, now synth, 6-2, 5-6, 5-1, 3-6, 3-8, subtle lift up, back down, 3-5, 2-7, 2-5, 2-7, 3-4. This lift up, same thing. It makes me wonder about that. I've been saying this a lot today. A lot of people need to hit these longer ranges. This is going to, again, either indicate your stamina, I think, or it's going to show you that you have a hidden opportunity here. And then finally, reaction's pretty decent. Going on to your final. So 3-1-6. So this is a line, so 3-8, 3-6, 3-1. So this does seem believable. Then you shift over here and you slow down to a 3-2. I bet that this is going to get pulled down. 3-3, I bet this is going to pull down. 2-3 seems more aligned. Again, this one shoots way too high up, and then it drops back down to sub 20. This is insane. Like, my favorite track for you, to be brutally honest, is this Turf 14. The fact that you're ending with a 19.21 sandwich with a 19.26 and a 19.48 and then a 20.25, this horse is getting really fast on long range turfs. And this the 14s has been bad luck. You're getting your bad hits out of the path. Hit those. I bet you're going to be really pleased with what you see there.
Yep. I have nothing else to add to that. You nailed it. The one thing that I really like seeing is that green indisputable on the synthetic 9s, that 27.78% after doing 27 races.
Yes.
That's incredible. And seeing that it pulls down to a 12.25, this, I can't agree more. You got to run those 11s, those 10s and 11s a little more, see if those continue to pull down.
Yeah. And like the fact that you got good opportunities on a lot of these things. So I think as you run this horse and you get really clever with where you place it, I think you'll be pleased with I'm a Vampire. Great name, by the way. And so now going on, I think we have 2 more horses to review. So taking a look at 51-89, quickly going through 7-7, 6-8, 5-2, 4-2, 3-5, 4-2. That weird pull up on the 7. Not 100% sold on dirts just yet. Your average or your reaction time seems about a little bit less than average. So you're most likely going to be performing further into it. So I wouldn't necessarily put too much energy into your short range. 12-8-3 with a slow reaction, that makes sense. dropping now to a 6-0, 4-4, 3-6, 3-7, 3-6, 2-9, 3-2, 2-6, and 3-1. Seems pretty reasonable. Now, going on to your turfs, the things I'm looking at for here, you got a lot that's slowing down, 3-8 to 2-9, 2-8, 2-8. They're following suit with linear regression, but I just don't know if it's going to be able to be fast enough to beat your population average. You're doing a good job spreading it. So what I think I would do if you're deciding to continue to race this horse, I think the only thing that I do not see in your data that I would really want to see is something above 5 furlongs, because I want to see a faster or a longer track so you could absorb your reaction. But to have an anchor track, you don't have anything like 59 is a decent anchor track. So more like that. I want to see a 50 or a 60 or a 70 somewhere on the right side of this map, because once you can get enough data on that one that you could feel confident that those furlong times are reasonable, compare that to the population track, and then you could start to decide, can I move left and right on this thing? But right now, there's not enough for me to go like, oh yeah, this is definitely where you should run. I would just suggest, for example, if on your synth 10s, if you're making money there, you got 36, just keep hitting one until you stop making money, take an assessment of it, and determine, okay, where can I move from beyond that point?
Yeah, and in case anyone's listening and don't quite understand what he means by an anchor, the idea is that when you've got your charting and you want to get faster down here, you need a point to say, like, here's where I agree that the data is solid. And like using that as your point. And then if your upper starts up here, you can draw your line. And that's what we're looking for, that slope from the upper to the lower. Whether you use 2s and 11s or you use 2s and 10s, that's fine.
Yep.
But creating that anchor where you actually trust the data, that you can consistently hit your average furlong over and over and over and over, that's when you can actually start to plot that line from top to bottom. And then that'll tell you whether or not you should even consider anything in between, because that slope will tell you if you can hit the faster than the population average.
Exactly. All right, so then we're going to end it with the freak show horse of Hung Like Brad. This horse is coming out just crushing its discovery, and when we take a look at this one, the scary thing is I think that there's other tracks where it's going to show up even better, but I don't think some of these are going to hold, which is a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
So you get starting with your dirt, your 7, 1, 5, 9, 4, 4, 3, 6, 3, 4, and 3, 4. It's leveling off right there, but it's showing that same linear regression. Moving on to your synth, your 7, 4, 4, 7. That's a big drop off. So either that's too high or that's too low. Dropping a 4, 2, 3, 5, 3, 4, 2, 4, 2, 3, 2, 7. You got to lift up here and then you're back down. So you got a killer indisputable score showing up here on your synth 9s, even though you got a lift up, which is the scary thing, because I think if you go to the right where you have a bad score, this is going to get faster. So I would be hitting your synth 10s. So this might go down in score, but talking about anchors, you got 74 hits here with a 52% podium rate. That's a solid anchor. So if you could hit more over here on your 11s, I think that's going to tell you where you're going to fall in between. But then moving on to turf, 12-2-8 is a crazy fast out the gate. And then you go to a 12-3-7. So that's where I freak out for the rest of us here, because if you race on your turf 6s more, one of these is going to change. And the fact that this horse is fast, I'm afraid it's going to get faster on turf 6s. 12-3, basically 8, that doesn't look right. So I think as you hit that, you're going to see this thing drop to like a 12-2-5 if this can maintain on the turf 5s. And then as you move your way down, you drop in again, 12-2-3, 2-5, 14. And then a 19 and a 17 and a 15 and an 18 and then a 3-1. So what's crazy about this is that this is stupid fast. This is insane. So good for you. But don't know if that's going to be maintainable. This is one of those things where I've heard people like Audie on our team, where he was complaining that Peg Dead was so strong for a period of time, and he's like, I don't know what happened to him. This might be a similar situation where you might have just gotten a lot of good luck because it's looking great. And if you got all of your lower limit rolls or your faster than average rolls out the gate, you're going to, with normal distribution, going to have the same amount of bad luck. So the question is this already normal distributed where you have good and fast rolls or good and bad rolls, or are you just getting good rolls?
I actually have two things to point out here. I'm going to disagree with your initial assessment on the turf. I think the 5s and 6s have space to stay up there at the slower rate. When we look at the vertical charting here, you've got 12.36 on dirt, 12.35 on synth. I think you can pull your turf back up all the way to 12.35 or 12.34, let's say, and that'll still stay in alignment with what we would typically see. You then move over to the 6s at the 12.37, and if we assume that the 5 is a 12.34, we're probably going to see something closer to a 12.33, 12.32.
Correct.
And then to the right, the 12.32 now starts to become more realistic. But here's the second point. That next one, the 8s. You have 153 races here. This is what should scare everybody. You have an anchor track that is down at 12.23 already. That's telling me you can feel confident that it's going to hold 12.3 or 12.23. What we don't know is what happens after that.
Correct.
Is it losing stamina? It's going to start to pull up. I don't know. Your 12.17s, 1.9s, 1.5s as you go down there, like you said, is insanely fast. It should probably come up a little bit, but it doesn't have that much room to move up. It really doesn't. When you have 153 on turf 8s, even if we're talking about a stamina loss, you're probably looking at still being lower 12.2s, and that is such a fast horse. The speed scores here, what's scary to me is that I actually think this is a synthetic horse, not a turf horse, which is mind-boggling based on the data I'm seeing, because this looks incredible on turf, but I think there's some potential here for the speed on synthetic to really shock you.
Yeah, I really want to see more of those 15s to get a secondary anchor on 15. That 3-1, just everything about that just screams incorrect. And that's mind-blowing. You must have ran some really slow races to pull the averages, considering you have a 25% podium and a 12.5% win rate, and it's that bad. So
I mean, 8 races though, like not enough data there.
Not enough at all. But these are the things that we would look for. So with that said, the last thing I can end on this is that we're trying to fix up these tools. We're trying to constantly bring these to you. So there's still debate. There's still some research. We want to have OXG on. We want to continue this. And as we continue to hone in on this, we're hoping to be able to find stuff that's a bit more trustworthy. We've updated our tool. So for those that are using this one, you might have been on DeRacers Analytics 1 or version 2. There is now version 3. It is in our Discord. I'll add the links in this video as well. Make sure you update yours because there's more tools. As you can see, the way that we just did that analysis, it doesn't take much rocket science. It's following through, look for these linear paths, and get an anchor. Once you have an anchor, it's going to give you a lot more confidence. And where we're focusing on is this section of your average furlong. So type in your ID. Make sure to save a copy of this so you don't compete with everybody else on this one. The detailed furlong analysis tab, that's still here. We haven't broken this up into the 3 phases yet because there's still a lot more research that we're putting into, but this still is a useful tool where you could take a look at your reaction speeds. You could take a look at each of your furlong averages as you work your way down, and you could see, of course, it's getting faster and faster. But the last one that I wanted to share with everybody, there's been discussions on people on Discord, people that were wondering, like, is a bot necessary? Is this game useful without? Well, we're no longer using a bot. This system here is designed, I like a blackjack table or a roulette table, where if you see it hit red 5 times in a row, you have just as much odds that the next one's going to hit red, but over time, you might think that black has a higher chance of hitting. So with this, you could type in your horse ID. So if I put 1418 here, you could change the surface. Dirt is 0, synth is 1, and turf is 2. And then you can take a look back at the past 30 races. This is going to sequentially show you your order. Now, I've recently discovered Skundert's really good at 14s and 15s. And if you take a look at this, he is going through one hell of a dry spell on 15s. So as you're putting them in and as you're moving your horses around, this might be an indicator that he is in a bad cycle, and a good cycle is around the corner, because I've seen Scott win 5 or 6 first places in a row on 15s. So this is a way that if I'm manually putting my horse in, I might want to take advantage of 1 dirt, 2 dirt, 3 dirt bets based off of this. So for especially people that are not using bots, and if you just want to be able to, with sniper precision, put your horses in, this might be an opportunity for you to get even more profit for what you have. The bots are great, but they're really for convenience. This is going to give you a different edge. So that way, hopefully we'll level the playing field for all people, but we're doing well without, and this is a tool that I really enjoy.
Yeah, these are all free tools. Just a reminder, go and grab the DeRacers Analytics 03, the 3rd version there, and make a copy for yourself. And all 3 of those tabs, the horse stats, the detailed furlong analysis, and this new or the recent races tab, allows you to really dig in different ways. And we want to continue to bring all of these things free to the community.
Yep. And we got lots more tools that we are working on, lots more coming. If you have questions that you would like us to talk about in this panel or AMA with OXG, please message us, let us know, and we'll put that together, hoping to shoot that sometime next week. So get those into us. Yeah, I think that hits everything from my end.
Yeah,
hope you guys found this useful, and hopefully this leads to getting you guys out there racing more. Be smart about it. We need more races of more data so we can have a little bit more horses that we can study. But thank you, everybody, for all the continued support. You guys rock.